everybody. Welcome to Two on Once Upon a Time. Two on One, the internet's top sensation, combining theology, pop culture, and theologians of varieties and stripes, talking about whatever the topic may be. I'm your co-host, the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
I am your other co-host, the Reverend Stephanie Kendall. Not as much of a downer as I may have come off at the beginning.
Right. Maybe that was a bit to really build up to Two on Once Upon a Time later. Hey, so Happy New Year, friend.
Happy New Year, friend.
And
hey,
happy season 3.
Happy season 3. I'm beside myself. I'm what?
Right.
I'm speechless, and yet it has some weird early 2020 vibes happening with the world and things. So it's I don't know, it's a weird time, but a grateful time because season 3
episode 81.
Episode 80, that seems
81. Well, I do want to begin our new year right with a little bit of business involving our sponsor, Jeff Wunrow Designs.
Dun, 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 dun.
Oh, other way. For those of you listening, we're pointing at the middle of our screen. Jeff Wunrow Designs is celebrating 17 years of making ordinary time extraordinary through the crafting of beautiful, handmade, gorgeous, durable liturgical textiles. You may be thinking like stoles. Yeah, stoles.
Yeah.
Also, though, paraments, banners, frontals, altar accessories, really anything that you need, Jeff Wunrow Designs has got you covered.
It's true. He's Jeff has been I have bought several stoles from Jeff with our code, which for those of you listening or those of you that are new here, our listeners, our Deuces is what we call our listeners. Our Deuces have a special code for Jeff. And as we found out last year, Jeff ran his own special on his website. It was 10% off. He gives our listeners, hands down, the best discount all year long. And so your discount code, it's a new one this year, Deuces.
We told you that 2 on 1 at checkout was expiring on December 31st, 2021, and it did. We have a new one.
What is it? It is 2 on 1 15.
Yes, so 2 and 1 are words, but 15 is digits.
Yes, 2 on 1, all letters. Then we have 2 numbers, 15. We all know that I'm not doing any more of this this part of the promo going forward.
That's a great New Year's resolution, Spiff. Yes, you can do 2 on 1, TWOONONE 15 at checkout for 15% off your entire stole purchase. Go to Jeff Wunrow, JEFFWUNRW.com today after the show. We'll make it work. And Spiff, it's Sondheim Month. It's January. It's Enero. It's January.
I love it. I'm so happy. And our guest today is a longtime friend of both of ours, someone who we just love, who has a beautiful singing voice, and possibly we'll get him to pop in and, and sing a little something, like a little, I don't know, like anything can happen on 2 on 1.
It takes 2 on 1.
Oh, this is going to go a lot of places, friends. But
let's bring him in. Let's do it.
Let's bring him in.
We're glad to welcome today the Reverend Nathan A. Russell, joining us from Ohio. I always mess up how to pronounce the town.
Elyria, Ohio.
Elyria, Ohio. Nathan, welcome to 2 on 1.
Thank you both. It's a pleasure to be here.
We are so happy to have you. Hey, Nathan, Happy New Year.
Same to you. Is it 2022? This is gonna be the best year ever, right?
It's what I've been told. It is what I've been told. We are vaccinated and masked and continuing to do the good work of building community together.
So
I still have the T-shirt that from 2020 that says, has just like the 1 star on it that says, "Not very good, would not recommend." And I want one that was 2021 that said, 1.5, not much better. And
well, maybe 2022 is a 2-star year.
Yeah. That's progress.
We our Christmas tree was up, and my ornament that my husband gave me in 2020 was David from Schitt's Creek, just the top of his head, and it said "Ew 2020." And my daughter looked at it, she goes, "We need another." I was like, thanks, honey.
True.
Welcome to season 3, Deuces, where we just talk about
It's actually kind of nice. Welcome to season 3. We started this show to talk about Sondheim's 90th when we were going on Instagram Live. 81 episodes later, we're talking about Sondheim again with you, Nathan Russell, and Into the Woods. So why don't you tell our listeners, our viewers, our deuces a little bit about yourself, please?
Well, I'll kind of pair this with Into the Woods a little bit to explain my relationship to that show and to Sondheim. But I am a 7th generation native Texan, the first one in my family to leave the state since 1840 to take a call to pastoral ministry in Rust Belt, Ohio. I have been here now since September 1st, 2018.
Wow.
62 of those weeks were spent online only in the midst of the most, I cannot say the most severe form of pandemic tide, because where we've been now is more severe than where we once were. But I love it. I would do it again in a heartbeat. Best decision, hardest decision I've ever made. And for me, the musical Into the Woods has always been about taking steps and a journey into the great unknown. When I first heard the music of Into the Woods, it was in a recording by Cynthia Clausen, who actually wound up singing at my ordination at Robert Carr Chapel in 2014. Yeah. But several years before that, she released a recording of No One Is Alone. And that was my first time to hear that song. And it, to me, was the gospel in disguise. And I was coming to terms with my own sexuality at that point. And that song sang me back to the heart of God. So I've loved it. I've loved the show ever since.
Well, and you directed it before, or you've done the music.
I just conducted it. So a couple of cool things about that. My last year of teaching at Tyler Junior College, which was just, I would rank that as the worst year of my life. Just so much went wrong. And that musical was a saving grace. And I knew I was going to seminary. I had already submitted my resignation for the end of the year with hope to go to Bright, though I had not yet been admitted. I'll say that. So we were going to do Into the Woods, and I just knew this was going to be a journey, a collaborative journey of saying farewell and also saying hello, and getting a cohort of students together to do this incredible show. A couple of things about it that were interesting. When I hired the orchestra, I could not find a violist to save my life. Like, I was just calling everybody that knew anybody that had ever heard of a viola.
Well, Tyler's the viola capital of East Texas.
It's like, as it always goes, we're always looking for those violas.
There are more Stradivari instruments in Tyler. And anyway, I finally called this one person.
A real niche joke.
Her name is Joni Rudak, and I called her. I said, I'm looking for a violist to play Into the Woods. And it was such a trial to even get the college to do Into the Woods, because they considered the musical to be too dark. Hear all the embedded racism in that, because that would fit Tyler Junior College. But anyway, so I got Joni Rudak on the phone, and I had to kind of ease her in, like, so we're doing this musical, it's Into the Woods. I just want you to know there's some themes here and she said, oh, honey, let me stop you right there. I played in the orchestra in the premiere, so I am quite familiar with the musical. And I was just like, and you live in Tyler, Texas? She had recently returned from being in the San Francisco Opera Orchestra, returned to East Texas, and we hired her. And it was just this incredible thing to have an original orchestra member as a part of our musical team. But the last thing to say about it is I called Stephen Sondheim's agent before we did the production and mailed him a poster of our performance, and he returned it to us signed.
Wow.
With a typed letter telling our cast to break a leg.
So that's
so I had that framed and presented it to the cast the night opening night, and I gave it to the director, and it now hangs in his home.
That was a constant theme after Sondheim's passing. People were posting, if you wrote him a letter, he wrote you back.
Yes.
And it's just the most amazing thing about him, honestly, because he was never too good for the people who loved him.
Oh, good.
For the uninitiated, I'm sorry, Into the Woods is a musical that debuted in the mid 80s or 1981. Is that right?
I thought it was 70s, but I could be wrong. I may have the wrong musical in mind. It didn't debut in on Broadway first. It was first in California.
Yes, West End.
Yeah.
But Into the Woods is a mishmash. It's a twisted fairy tale of Jack and the Beanstalk, Cinderella, Rapunzel, all sorts of stories intertwining in the woods. The first act is very much like, if you ever want to do a junior production that's appropriate for children, just do act 1. And act 2, there's consequences. Like that's the best way to put it.
There are consequences. It is not like Dear Evan Hansen. I'm sorry. That's a weird thing to take it, Dear Evan Hansen.
Hey, I'm 37. I'm almost old enough to play Evan Hansen on Broadway. There's another niche joke. You got it.
There is another. Deuces, this is going to be a Broadway niche joke show. Well, and Into the Woods was my second musical I directed. My first one was Godspell. My second one was Into the Woods, but it was my first main stage. I had did a black box version of Godspell. It did really well. And I was the first student to put up a big main stage show in the chapel. In my musical buddies and all of that, and it was incredible. But my one regret, although I love everyone in my cast, so there's no real regrets, however, Angel Blue auditioned for our show. Angel Blue, of first ever Black woman to play Mimi at the Met, Angel Blue, and we passed.
Oh no.
And we did not cast her, and I'm just like, really, Spiff? Really? Missed opportunities. We're still good friends, but Into the Woods has a real special place in my heart. And I played it the entire time when Sondheim passed. I went down, Deuces, look for this online, and I will repost it. I went down to the theater the night that Broadway went dark for Sondheim, and it was just really moving. And you're just there amongst like Broadway legends, and like Patty's there and everyone. I am actually I saw Company on December 21st, so that was amazing. And just he's influenced so much of who I am as someone who came to church late, someone who did not grow up in it. We all know that I consider the theater my very first church, and he is such a big part of the liturgy of my life. And so just really grateful for that. So with all of that said,
and Deuces, if you haven't seen it, there's a movie version. It's all right. It's not great. They had to cut some stuff. I mean, I'm not going to say something with Meryl Streep is bad, but maybe I would if she weren't in it. There is a recording though of the original cast: Chip Zien, Joanna Gleason, Bernadette Peters. It's a live performance, and it's exactly what you should watch. It's available on the A to Z one with a smile face. You can rent it for $3 or buy it for $9.
Blue one.
Yes. So, okay, Into the Woods as a metaphor for the church. Here's my first question. Who shall we say, what character shall we say is the metaphor, the stand-in for the church in Into the Woods? Because I was watching it and I was like, it's the witch. No, it's the first prince. No, it's the baker's wife.
Maybe unpopular opinion, I think it's the narrator.
Oh.
Ooh, say more.
Yeah. So the narrator is kind of the one that's part of the plot, but separate from it.
Until he's not.
Until until
he, spoiler show. Go for
spoiler alert. Yeah, until he's not, right. But I think that at least how I understand like my role in the church as a person that preaches every week, we are narrating stories back to the church. And there's another musical, Sondheim, Sweeney Todd, that begins with "Attend the Tale of Sweeney Todd." And that automatically tells you some things like, A, this is not a true story, or it is not a factual story.
Thank you.
But you are to attend the tale. And I think in many ways, as a preacher, as custodians of the gospel of Jesus Christ, we are attending the stories, the narratives of Scripture, and it's our job to tell them back to the congregation, to God's people. And then, of course, sometimes the people are like, no, that's not the way the story is going to go.
You don't like the way you're telling this particular story.
Yes, that's right. And so they'll feed us to a giant. But I think that's one character, but certainly not the only one that I could say is a metaphor for the church.
I think the church thinks it's Little Red. I think they want to be like, look at us, we're happy and we're good, but we don't understand like the harm or the ways in which we have harmed and the ways in which we just kind of perpetuate that without thinking it's bad. When we really, I think, need to lean into wanting to be the witch. I think that there's some truth that she carries throughout the entirety of it in a way that isn't, I don't know, she's not the best, she's not the worst, she just is in a lot of spaces. And I think that there is some part to that. But now that I say that, I kind of agree with, I want to just be like, nope, it's the narrator. You're right.
Well, now there many things can happen in the wood, right? So it's a different.
Once again, please.
Yeah, exactly. Which is the gift of, I think, this work that we are called to, is that the stories keep coming around again and again and again, and we get to tell them in new and different ways. And we saw things that we've never seen before. We know things that we've never known before. It doesn't mean that we were wrong then and that we're more right now. It's just we've been to the wood.
I'm going to argue for the first prince, or rather the princes as the term, because they're privileged as hell. Once they have what they think they want, they don't want it anymore, and they're always looking at the next the next unconscious princess. Is anything almost or something asleep? It's one of my favorite lines in all of it. It almost makes up for dwarves are very upsetting. It's more the feeling of, and maybe I'm speaking as a 7 on the Enneagram, I don't know, and maybe I'm just putting it on the church, but there's always this nothing is good enough or nothing is enough. And sometimes that's a great thing for the church, olam tikkun, but other times it's we don't have the best praise band. And if we have a praise band, our grandkids will come back, or we don't have every seat filled. And then if we don't do that, we can't tear down the sanctuary and build a bigger monument to ourselves. It's that. Sometimes. I also love the second prince. I would play him tomorrow, casting directors. So just let me know.
For anyone out there casting all the things.
Yeah, I can stagger around fake blind. Fine.
Well, and I also think that we do a lot of, I mean, if we're going to put it in a song version, I think the church does a lot of Your Fault.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So I every now and then I'll do a riff. Well, more often than not, I will do a riff on Into the Woods. And right after Sondheim's death, they rolled. And I knew the people in the congregation that had either seen the musical or were very familiar with it. And I could look at them and they're like, I see what you did there. So, for example, we're doing Reverend Dr. Will Gaffney's Women's Lectionary, Year W. Woohoo! Yes, fantastic.
So are we? Yep.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yes, here's mine.
mine's
which
on
I'll
the shelf
also
over there. I can hold on.
Everyone's plugging old Gaffney's book.
I'll also hold up with my book of Grimm's fairy tales.
Ooh, I like that.
That
That's in my guest bedroom.
the cast of our production of Into the Woods all
Oh.
inscribed. So this is like on that list of like if the place burns down, this is one of the first things to.
Oh, that makes me so happy. Like I'm tearing up a little.
I know, that's beautiful.
Okay, so we were talking about Elizabeth's pregnancy, and the text always says, I don't care if it's Sarah or Hannah, or the mother of Samson's mother. Oh yeah, that's right. She's not named, right?
No, I don't think she's named.
Yeah, she's not given a biblical name.
And if she is, you're Deuces, you're listening to two pastors who are recovering from Christmas.
Yeah, right. I was like, I just preached this text not too long ago. And that's right. She is named, but the editors do not recover her name for us. Anyway, every single time the narrator of the text says that her womb was barren. So I would riff in my sermon. I was like, she's responsible. She's the one to blame. It's her fault. And say, why is it that we never said the man had a low sperm count? Why is she always the one to blame? And so anyway, I don't think we realize the damage we do when we read a biblical text like that just assumes that the woman is barren, or that her womb is barren, or even worse, that God did this, without also questioning, well, wait a minute. If we want to be crass about it, why didn't he shoot blanks? Okay. Why didn't he have a low sperm count? Right. Why can't we make that argument? Or is it just that our innate desire to blame someone?
Well, and I think that that's a great question, because I think that we want to always blame someone, and that's okay, because I do think that there's often blame to, blame just to be like, let's find the source, not necessarily like to point the finger, but like, how do we correct what is happening? How do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? But where I think we often go wrong in the church, in our lives, I'm guilty of this, so I'm not just pointing my finger at like a church, but like the church. As humans, we forget to include ourselves in that blame, that we have participated, even if it is to point the finger, like that there is like in saying, it wasn't my fault, I did all the things that was right, here look at me. Like we do that far more often than saying, this went wrong. We can maybe trace it back to a certain incident, and yet we've all participated in its systemic growth and or whatever. We see a lot of this in I think we see a lot of it everywhere, but primarily we can point back to just like the racist tendencies, and especially like woke white women who are like, but I voted for Obama, and like I don't know, we are participants in that fault. Right. And each one of them in that song is a participant in the fault, and nothing actually changes what happened.
Well, so I want to take this a little bit further then. So if the church is the witch, or the church ought to be the witch, or however that works, and I like that, like there's a queerness to the witch, there's a overtness. I
also think we don't want to be the witch, because we have been told that witchcraft is bad and witches are bad and all whatever.
That's stupid. Like, don't, and not you're stupid, like the ban on witchcraft.
No, I agree. I'm just saying, I think that there's something to the church being the witch as well.
What really matters is the blame. Someone you can blame. Fine. If that's the thing you enjoy, placing the blame, if that's the aim, give me the blame, and then just give me the boy. And I'm sorry, watching the show for the 10,000th time, I'm like, they should have just thrown Jack to the Giant. Like that is the greater good. Toss the dumb kid in, like, do it. No, I'm kidding, kind of. I'm half kidding. I did want to ask a technical question because it's been driving me crazy. And Nathan, you've conducted the show. The Last Midnight, is it in 6/8 or is it in 3/4 or is it in 2?
It's in 2. I conducted it in 2.
Okay, and then it's just the triplet and the boom bop.
Yeah.
Bum, bum. Okay, thank you. My mom came to visit over Christmas. She left this morning, and we watched it. And she and I have been arguing about this for like 2 weeks. So I'm glad I was wrong.
Welcome to Music Theory with 2 on 1.
Well, it's
been a really long time since I've taken Music Theory with Patty G. Shout out to Patty.
But okay, so the church. I mean, what if we're the harbingers of saying it's the last midnight? That's it. Yeah. Like this world is ending. You're messing it up, and you still want beans to make you rich. You want to do that. Like I know the church can't be sarcastic well, but what if we're actually supposed to dissolve at the end by saying, fine, we divest. This world is broken. You are breaking it, and we can no longer, I don't know. But then what does the church look like after it dissolves? Maybe it's not my best questioning.
Well, it's a good interpretation. I mean, there are so many possibilities with this. One of the things I love about the musical and even the biblical text is that you can see it again and again and again and again, and it always means something new. I just attended back in November a production of Into the Woods. So this is just before Sondheim died. A production of Into the Woods at the Baldwin Wallace Conservatory of Music in Berea, Ohio. Really phenomenal program and a great staging of the production. And the director said, this is my 6th time doing Woods, she said. Oh. And I always learn something new. And I thought that's it. There, you cannot conclude. I think it would be dangerous to conclude this is the definitive meaning of Into the Woods.
I saw a production in Dallas a few years ago where they didn't have a narrator. The cast narrated it themselves, and like the stepsisters, they literally held up a curtain rod with 2 dresses hanging from it, and members of the cast like everybody played the stepsisters. Literally Cinderella's dad, they just held up a portrait once and it went and that was it. But it was so low maintenance, and so like somebody played Milky White. So Into the Woods is a fairy tale, and it's almost children's theater. And I noticed watching it that there's no swear words in it, which fascinates me just because there's always, it seems like nowadays there's always at least one or whatnot, but it's a completely clean show. I mean, the prince makes out with the baker's wife. The implication is they snuggle. And that's what
depends on the show you watch.
True. I'm sorry. Well, speaking about the original, but
well, and the original, the wolf does have a rather
big, that's
down phallus. Let's just say. So it is. There are themes that are difficult.
Well, and I was listening to it this morning. I actually listen to it often. Moments in the Wood is probably, I think the line, if life were merely moments, even now and then a bad one, but if my life were merely moments, then you never know you had one, is something I sing maybe once a day to myself when things get hard, when things are good, just all of it. It's very Derrida, I think, very much. It's like the moments of our lives that we cannot recreate or get back, and you have to kind of experience them. And
can I interject something here? And without I'm terribly sorry if I am interrupting, and I fear that I am. But
no, you're good.
But with when the Annunciation happens, Gabriel to Mary, Dr. Gaffney asked in a sermon she wrote delivered years ago, did Mary say me too? And in Dr. Gaffney's sermon, it's who will sit with Mary in this moment? And so that was right after I read that sermon right after Sondheim had died. And so I was preaching that text the Sunday after. And so with that Annunciation, I was like, and isn't it true that life is made of moments, even now and then a bad one? And who will who will share this moment, who will sit in this moment with Mary. Is it Cinderella that will take Mary? Is she the, I mean, if we want to go really, really far, is she the Elizabeth that takes the younger one and sings No One Is Alone? You know, it's the show is perfection. I love it.
Yeah, it's really good. It just is. But I think that there's something to these moments that Sondheim helps us understand that we are living in and not just creating. That he calls us to the present in a way that I think often we always are thinking 2 steps ahead, especially as faith leaders. And so I'm wondering for each of you how, if that resonates, if you feel that, you know, these life of merely moments, if we do well enough to sit in them and not and participate in them and not just maybe conduct or direct or, you know, be in them as performers, but to experience the moment, especially these moments in the woods.
I don't like moments in the woods. I don't do well in liminal space. I have had to learn how to be in liminal space indefinitely. I literally burst into tears in August at the prospect of having to go back into lockdown. Like, I will not go back into it. I thought of it as the box, like one gets shoved in a box in prison and it's solitary confinement. It's also the safe thing to do, or it's the it's the right thing, and I get it. But like, my worship team had to start laughing at my jokes because they realized when I preached to an empty room and no one would laugh, it killed me a little bit every time.
Yeah.
I don't need all moments, but damn, it's just been the woods a lot for the last couple of years, and I need to say out loud, it's making me bonkers.
We just concluded, I should say now, it feels like we just concluded our Christmas concerts, holiday concerts with the Cleveland Orchestra, and I sing in the orchestra chorus, and it's just such a phenomenal experience. And singing with what even the New York Times calls Cleveland America's greatest orchestra. So it's
Wow.
Really, really quite phenomenal. So we had a guest conductor, his name was Brett Mitchell, and he said our night of the dress rehearsal, he mentioned the late, great Stephen Sondheim. I'm like, I'm there with you, brother. I am there. I will follow you wherever. And he said, the audience is the final collaborator. And that's a Sondheim quote. Yep. And I Googled it a little bit more, and to look at the fuller quote. And Sondheim said, the last collaborator is your audience. When the audience comes in, it changes the temperature of what you've written. Things that seem to work well, work in a sense of carry the story forward and be integral to the piece, suddenly become a little less relevant or a little less functional or a little overlong or a little overweight or a little whatever. And so you start reshaping from an audience. And that to me just, that's not directly related to Into the Woods, but it is Sondheim and speaks to that relationship of what we do as a community, as an embodied people.
Well, I mean, it also comes into proclamation. I'm doing doctoral work right now in homiletics because I think the sage on the stage style of preaching is dead, or it's dying. I think we have to find a way to do collaborative improvisational preaching, whatever that looks like, and I'm not sure. Don't get me wrong, I'm still going to sage on the stage on Sunday. But it is that there's that audience dynamic. I'm reminded that Merrily We Roll Along, they went into frantic edits when it debuted on Broadway because the audience kept walking out. And
they haven't stopped editing that show.
Yeah. And I think all of us, we preach consistently. There's such a difference between being in a room and, you know, Stan Hagedorn at Bright Divinity School was always like, well, Arthur, you have a background in comedy and we need more people that can read a room. And I'm like, I can't. It's just weird. Anyways, I'm sorry. Spiff, excuse me. I veered.
No, you're fine. I was just, for me, I was just, thinking about these moments. We all have a lot of them these last couple of years. Well, we have them throughout our lives, but I think these last couple of years have heightened some of the moments that we've been called to be present to. And I was just curious about, y'all's experience about staying present, not staying put, because I do think what this show does well is that it moves, right? Yeah. There's a great line and it's I'm in the wrong story. And like, I feel like we are often found in the wrong story, either, as faith leaders, we're called to a church that says that they're one thing and you find out that there's something else. I'm in the wrong story that I thought I was going to. School is different. Life is different. 2020 throws you a pandemic and you are in the dang wrong story. And yet, here is your moment to be present. You trade your beans, you run into all new people and things, and now you aren't in the wrong story, you're in your story. It just looks a lot different than you thought it would. And I think that Sondheim really teaches us this kind of biblical exegesis and life exegesis of recognizing that you are more than the current story that you are in. And I'm wondering what the church might learn from that writ large.
Ooh.
Well, Bar McClure at Bright said,
big shout out to Bright. We're going to need you to retweet this episode.
Well, I work with her once a month as a leadership and clergy coach, and she has saved my hide on more than one occasion. And so I'm grateful for her. I'm glad to admit that and give her credit for it. But one day at orientation at Bright, she said, "I believe in the one who will surprise us. That's my best understanding of God." And, when Mary received the unexpected announcement from Gabriel, I think of when she said, "How can this be?" Is that much different than I'm in the wrong story? I mean, seriously, right?
Oh, that's good. Yeah. I like it.
When we found out, I was at my church for not quite a year and a half when the pandemic hit, and I was like, I was not called to be a pastor in the midst of a global pandemic. I mean, who would say that? I mean, and that's the myth of American exceptionalism. Like, we didn't know this was possible, or we didn't think that we would be so vulnerable, and yet here we are. And it's like, is this what we have been called to? Is God surprising us even in these unexpected moments? I love it.
It's the question, I think, and I'm putting a little note in our chat just as the queer community that loves theater loves this show. And I really don't know one person who is under the umbrella of queerness who does theater and doesn't absolutely adore the show. And watching it, I realized it's because from death and loss comes family. And it's almost a heteronormative family, like there's mom and dad and boy and girl kind of at the end, but it's absolutely not. Because, Jack literally refers to Red Riding Hood as his pet. But I'm coming back to the narrator is the church, because I love that. And I think there's something about killing the narrator in the middle of the second act that we really might want to unpack about what the church does, or the church dissolving, or anything else. And I think the what comes out of struggle is family and familial closeness and familial. These are people who are wounded separately, but they're wounded together, and therefore they heal together. And I think there's something to be said in the church where if everything is going well, if we're all the Act One Into the Woods church, we don't get the full show and we don't really change. And we just want the next kingdom or the next cow or the next baking accident. So
it's, the line, "Careful the tale you tell, that is the spell." Because children, parishioners, will listen
Mm-hmm.
And we will take those stories and we will run with them. And if we don't complexify them, if we shelter them, if we redact them, like we don't talk about Cinderella and the stepsisters and the stepmother cutting off the toes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where that did not make it into the Disney version.
God, I wish it would have.
It would have been better. But who, I think we have to ask ourselves, who are we protecting when we redact the story this way? And I don't care if it's a fairy tale. I don't care if it's a biblical story. Who are we sheltering? Who are we protecting? Careful the tale you tell.
Well, John Bell at the community at Iona, I heard him at the Festival of Homiletics. It had to be 10 years ago now. And he talks about whenever they bring school groups in, inevitably a teacher will be like, will you tell the children a Bible story? And he always tells Yael, like without exception. And she hammered a spike through Sisera's head. And it scandalizes the teachers and the kids love it. And I always think about that because I get too scandalized as a teacher.
Well, yeah, I think we all get too scandalized as a teacher. And I think that that's the call, right? Especially in this moment to say okay, I'm going to change my answer. I think this entire episode is just us changing our answer of who the church is, because I want to say that now I'm going back because I'm going to stick with you. I think the Cinderella's prince may be the church, who is a very nice prince. He's a prince who's prepared, yet spreads pitch on the stairs, and we aren't actually attracted. We just get stuck until we can unstick ourselves. And our best bet is to become Cinderella that asks the question, did I kiss him back? Like, is this what I want? Am I stuck in pitch, or am I in a relationship that is reciprocal and good for me and good for the story writ large?
Well, and he's a very nice prince, but nice is different than good.
Yes.
Oh, exactly.
Perfect. So I'll join you in changing my answer too. I will say that the pastor is the narrator.
Okay.
The church is the cast.
Ooh.
Oh.
And the narrator is part of the cast, not separate from it.
Definitely often killed from it. Metaphorically, I don't know, there's probably stories out there, but I mean, if we don't take care of ourselves and tell the stories with care, as understanding ourselves to be participants in the cast, we can let ourselves be killed off.
What if we're the giant and Jesus Christ is the narrator?
Well, you're getting into what I would hope you would ask as your final question. If you want to go there, I'm game.
We're not quite there.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Anything can happen in these woods. We will be there, but
okay.
I do want to ask about Little Red Riding Hood, because and Grandma and Cinderella's mother. So first of all, I love the part doubling in the show is important. The very nice prince also plays the wolf, and the wolf sings this song. Oh yeah, it's totally about eating somebody, but it's really very, very sexually charged. Cinderella's mother is a provider and a voice of reason. And then there's Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother, who is like almost psychotic with knives. The part doubling is important because it's supposed to, oh, and of course the narrator also plays the baker's father, who's a spirit in the woods, or rather just a chaos bringer, and you have chaos and order balanced. This is an odd one, and it's a total pastoral question. What are the two disparate parts you find yourself playing the most in the church, and what's the role that we actually need to play that we don't?
I'll stick with the narrator as one, and the second is the prince.
Okay.
Because I would say it's well, at least for me, like when I entered the search and call process after November 2016, if we can remember what happened in that month. because
I can't remember last week. So
Was it an election?
Yes, there was something that happened that year, and I thought I got to go to the church. I cannot continue to play it safe. And
sorry, I just caught on to what you were saying, and I just remembered where I was, and I was with you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I remember that night.
Me too.
It was awful. It was the worst.
Yeah.
I remember being in the chapel and just all of us just falling.
The wailing and gnashing of teeth was real.
It was real. And I knew from that moment, like, I've got to go activate a search and call profile. And I had 16 rejection letters before I had one yes.
And aren't they feeling dumb now?
Well, I don't know.
I mean, the 16, not I'm sorry, that was not the good people of Washington Avenue. The 16 folks who said no, excuse me, that was unclear.
I think it's hilarious. Well played. But now having been in this call for 3 years, it's just like agony that can cut like a knife. And then back to my wife. I mean, the heteronormativity of it all, but I get that the thing you want more than anything can also cut you like a knife.
It's the humanness of it. It's that we are in profession. We are called. It's not even just like we applied and we did other things in our life, like as we all have. But this work that the three of us are called to do is just that, a calling. And so we've got to lean in, and yet it's so far out of our control. The story that we are a part of, it's why improv, I think improv training for pastors and preachers is so important, because you yes and it so often, and are called to yes and it so often, and yet sometimes you want to be like, no, this is not where I need to be, or what, like, it's when you say this, I am in the wrong story.
Well, and there's the second Prince and Rapunzel arc at the end of the first act, in which Rapunzel, her hair is torn off. She's exiled into the desert where her husband is blinded and he staggers around. She bears twins by herself, and then he finds her blinded and she cries, and it restores his sight, and they find each other and they go back into the real world. And this entire narrative takes place over like maybe a minute. And it's played up for comedy, which is good because it's a terrifyingly horrible part of the story, but it's act one, so they gloss it. I don't think we understand that. I think pastoral ministry is about living in exile. We never quite fit in. We're never going to. We're always working towards that next step, and there's a gift for it because we get to be outsiders. But there's also just that longing of like, why isn't Cinderella enough? Or why isn't Sleeping Beauty enough? And I'd like to imagine, of course, after Sleeping Beauty, there's got to be another princess somewhere in a castle somewhere. And maybe that's another call, or maybe that's a new initiative. And I don't know, I think we're gluttons for punishment in some ways because we have to be. But I don't think the gluttony for punishment is necessarily sacrificial ministry.
Yeah, you were just telling the Rapunzel story, and like, again, 2 on 1, you've really messed me up on being able to just let a story be a story, because I'm like, ooh, that's a John 9 Vashti mashup. That's like a Vashti being exiled from the castle. Who knows if she was pregnant? Who knows what happens to Vashti? Is out in the wilderness, has this husband, like, and then there is sight restored and possibly fullness of life. So that is my inability to let something just be something and not tie something back to a biblical narrative.
Well, I can't watch things anymore without being like, so if this is for 2 on 1, what's my final answer? And of which we are coming up. We want to be cognizant of our time and respect our guests. Nathan Russell, thank you. This has actually gone all over the place, which is what we expected, and it's been marvelous. Thank you so much for being our guest today. We do have a final question. I always do the 1-row promos, so Spiff is going to ask that final question.
Because Spiff doesn't know the difference between letters and numbers when she's talking out loud. But Nathan, yes, thank you so much. I mean, the expectation that it was going to go all over the place is what exactly happened, because it's a diverse cast. It's a big cast.
And that's
what
happens in the woods.
And anything can happen in the woods, and anything can happen on 2-on-1.
May we?
But what biblical narrative theme, character, verse, what book, whatever, are you most reminded of in 2-on-1? Or
Into the woods.
Not in 2-on-1, and Into the Woods.
Hands down. So the first sermon I ever preached with Into the Woods parallels was David and Goliath. And of course, the sermon title was "There Are Giants in the Sky." And the way the church has always told the story, again, careful the tale you tell, because children will listen, is that you have to end a giant. You have to fail a giant in order to stop them. And so it's the myth of redemptive violence, that by killing Goliath, killing the giant into the woods, then everything is solved. And A, I don't know that is true. B, we are the giants in someone else's sky. And we don't understand that someone is coming toward us, rock in hand, sling in the other, saying, I come to you in the name of the Holy One. And so the final turn of that sermon was, imagine no more giants waging war. So I have preached that sermon twice, and I always close it saying, there are giants in the sky. There are big, tall, terrible giants in the sky. And the Holy One, the God of hosts, will deliver us from them and from being them.
I'm jumping on that. I'm going to say that the assembled body of Christ is the giant, the narrator is Jesus Christ, and the cast is the world. Because we should be sated by the narrator. We should be sated by the word. That should be enough. But instead, we want to go on a rampage and consume as many people as we can. I would argue that the church is more an agent of destabilization, and I mean the big church is an agent of destabilization and empire politics than it is about radical sacrifice and self-giving. And we're stomping through the world rather than tending to it. And the giant, you will remember, was betrayed by Jack. He robbed her. He cut down the beanstalk. He killed her husband. She kind of has a right to go on a rampage, but also she refuses to negotiate and she's going to wipe it out. I'm not saying the church was harmed by the world, but there's a dynamic there. And also, because we devour the narrator, the world has to wait for us to figure out what to do next. And it may come from the church dying and dissolving and being reborn, because that's the only way anything gets resurrected anyhow. Yeah. Please hire me for a job, church, in the future that's listening to this.
Oh no, we're doing God's work here.
And things are good at Riverside, by the way. I really love my church. Happy New Year, church. Please don't listen.
Happy New Year, church. I keep going back and forth with what I'm going to answer on this one. I'm going to just name that, but I think I'm going to go with, I think the woods themselves, particularly the journey of the baker's wife, is the discernment we are called to as people of faith. That there is something there that in the good and the bad, the princes you meet, we all think we want to meet the princes. We all think that we want the riches and the glory and, and the big things that come. And yet we are called to continue to travel. And that discernment comes when we know it is time to leave the woods. And whatever that looks like, to enter the next phase of life, or phase or space of life. And so I'm going to go, I think that the baker's wife tells a really beautiful tale of life for each of us, but particularly those of faith, in which we journey both connected to others, but also individually. So.
Amen. All right. Well, hey, it does turn out that the slotted spoon can catch the potato. Nathan Russell, thank you very much for joining us on 2-on-1 today.
Well played, author. Well played. I love it.
Nathan is the pastor of Washington Avenue Christian Church in Elyria, Ohio. You can find him on Twitter. You can find him on the Facebook. I watch their worship services sometimes because I'm like, someday I hope I learn to do worship that well. It's really good. And it's a good word each and every week. So Nathan, thank you 1,000 times. I'm going to remind our listeners and our viewers that you can go to jeffwunrow.com and get 15% off your entire stole. We put a graphic on the bottom of the screen. I don't know why I laminated.
I don't either.
Like a jackass. But you can do that. Go to jeffwunrow.com, jeffwunrow.com. We will be back next week. On behalf of 2 on 1, it's the three of us. I'm the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
I'm the Reverend Stephanie Kendall.
I'm the Reverend Nathan A. Russell.
Hey, and we're going to be back another time. Later, deuces. Get more 2 on 1 at twoononeproject.com.